everyone, and welcome back to class. Today we're going to pick up with the rest of the Great Depression. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys so you can see where I'm going to start. I'm going to start right here with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In the election of 1932, you have Herbert Hoover, who is going to run for re-election. And remember, he is that, kind of a cold fish, not overly friendly, not Mr. Personality kind of individual. And he's running against Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who is all about personality and charisma. People are just attracted to him because he exudes confidence. He is a positive individual. And so that kind of attitude is going to propagate itself. Positivity breeds positivity, and negativity breeds negativity. And so his confident, easygoing personality is going to attract a lot of voters into his camp. So he is going to win the election of 1932 and be inaugurated in March of 1933. He brings with him this lady right here. This is Eleanor Roosevelt. She is a champion of minorities. It's because of her that Marian Anderson is going to get to sing at the Lincoln Memorial. And she is going to be his eyes and ears out in the public. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is the president that, when he was a younger man, contracted polio. And he was paralyzed from the waist down, so he's going to be in a wheelchair. Now, you don't very often find pictures of him sitting in his wheelchair. Most of the time, he is sitting behind a desk, or he is standing at a podium, or maybe even on the arm of his oldest son. So very rarely do you see him where he, in his viewpoint, would have appeared weak. But being in a wheelchair and not having the same mobility, Eleanor Roosevelt is going to do a lot of the running around that he would have done and make connections with people. So she is going to be a definite asset for him. He was also the kind of person that was willing to experiment with whatever he could come up with to fix the economy. And that's why this cartoon is here. He's just putting everything he can at it. Think about when you were in kindergarten. And it is February 14th, and the kindergarten teacher brings out the paper and the glue and the glitter and the colors, and you're going to make a Valentine for your mom. And so you get it all ready. You make your heart, and you put all the glue in it, and then you take the glitter and you just dump it on top of all of it. And so the next step is to pick up that card and shake off the excess glitter. Well, that's kind of like what he's going to do. He's going to throw whatever he can, dump everything he can on the economy, and shake off what doesn't stick and keep what does. He has got a cheerful personality that he is going to use to his benefit when he conducts what's known as fireside chats. He is going to use the radio to connect with the American public, and the way he talks and the way he comes across, it sounds like he's sitting right in your living room or right at your kitchen table talking to you. And so he gives the American people the idea that we're going to do this together. He's not going to sit up in his ivory tower and make pronunciations about what's going on and not do anything himself. And so he has a really good knack at connecting with the people. Now, he gets elected, and the first 100 days of his administration is going to be that time frame where he is going to do not so much the majority, but a huge amount at trying to fix the economy. And one of the first things he's going to do is declare a bank holiday, and he's going to call it a holiday for a reason. If you call it a holiday and not call it a bank closure, then it makes people worry less, because with a bank closure, there's no telling if that bank will ever open again. But everybody knows that with a bank holiday, it's closed for so many days and then it opens back up. And so it makes people tend not to panic by calling it a bank holiday. So he's going to close the banks for 4 days, And Congress is going to be able to get through the Emergency Banking Act, which is going to start to stabilize the banks. I think this is when the Glass-Steagall Bank Act gets passed through Congress. Now, he is really big on using Keynesian economics. Now, this was set up or thought of by a guy named John Maynard Keynes, and it's the idea of using government money to invest it into the economy. Today, we call it deficit spending, and every single president from Roosevelt to now has at some point in their presidency used deficit spending to prop up the economy. Now, in your notes, you'll see that there's a little section there on laissez-faire economics. I'm going to skip over that for a few minutes, and I'll come back to that after I talk about the New Deal programs. The New Deal of FDR has three parts to it. It has relief, recovery, and reform. So some of the programs were to provide immediate relief, some were to help the economy recover, and some were to fix it so this never happens again. So it's kind of like, take a football player, and they're out doing this big play, and they get crushed by the other team and break a leg. Well, the first thing the trainers are going to do when they rush out of the field is offer that player some kind of relief. They're going to, help them stabilize it and get them on a stretcher and get them off to the hospital. And so that's relief. Once they get to the hospital, they are going to set the leg, put it in a cast, and the player is going to be in a cast for a number of weeks, and that's recovery. And then after they get the cast off, then they're going to go to PT, and they're going to learn how to not get into that same situation again. That's reform. I'm trying to give you kind of analogies to be able to remember how all these different alphabet soup things are going to work, because when you look at the list I've given you of all the different New Deal programs, you're going to see that they all come with an acronym, and that is why this time period is called alphabet soup. Some of these are more significant than others because some of these are still around today. So the Agricultural Marketing Act, where Congress is going to set aside money to pay farmers not to farm and not to increase their livestock. And so they're going to try and reduce supply so they can increase prices. They're trying to increase demand by reducing supply. And so they're going to pay farmers to leave 1/4 to 1/2 of their fields unplanted, knowing that the farmers still have to eat. And so that's why they're going to pay them. They're also going to kill off about 1/3 of the livestock. Now, the livestock at this time is not really worth selling anyway. By the time we get to this point, the Dust Bowl has overtaken the Midwest. Cattle are scrawny, and so most of the meat is going to be given back to the farmers because there's just not enough of it to make any money off of. Now, while this program is ruled unconstitutional in 1936, other farm subsidies are going to replace it. And so even today in the 21st century, farmers still get subsidies for the government to keep the supply and demand in a better balance. Another one you're going to want to put an asterisk by is the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. Today we call this FEMA instead of calling it FERA. But it's another one of those agencies that is still in operation today. When you have some kind of natural disaster, then the government provides funds and help to help that community get back up on their feet. The Tennessee Valley Authority is still around. It's still the #1 producer of electricity in the United States. I mean, think about this. This is in the 1930s, and you have got about 1/3 of the nation that do not have indoor plumbing. They don't have electricity. They're still using kerosene and candlelight. And so for the Tennessee Valley Authority to establish these dams that are going to create hydroelectricity, that's going to be a big deal for that area and really bring them, into more of the modern age. The next one I want you to make sure you star is the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Go to any bank, go up to the drive-thru, look over at the window, and if it's a national bank like Wells Fargo or Chase or Bank of America, you're going to see FDIC on a gold rectangle sticker in that window. That means that that bank is a part of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and your deposits are insured up to today up to $250,000. It starts off like I think $5,000. So back in the 1980s, when we had a financial crisis due to a scandal in the savings and loan industry, my bank closed. But I didn't lose any of my money, because back during this time period, when all these banks collapsed, everybody that had money in the bank lost everything. Savings account, checking account, everything was gone. And so they were instantly left destitute. So with the FDIC, that gives the depositor some guarantee that their money is still going to be there. Same thing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. It's a oversight body of the stock exchange, and it's still around today. They're the ones that went after Martha Stewart several years ago. They've investigated Mark Cuban. So any kind of shady dealings they think might be going on the stock market, then the SEC oversees that. Now, as you're looking down that list, before I go to the next page of your notes, you'll see that there are some of these that have been ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And that's because they felt like the federal government was overstepping states' rights. And so that's why some of these areas and some of these programs were ruled unconstitutional. Now, on the next page of your notes, it continues on with the second New Deal. So coming about 1936, the economy had been, kind of improving, but then it takes a slump, and so the next round of programs are going to get put out there. So you have the FHA, Federal Housing Authority, still around today. Most people that have a mortgage for their house, they either have an FHA loan or they have a VA loan. There are some that have conventional loans, but I would say at least half of the mortgages out there are FHA loans. The Social Security Administration, of course, everybody knows about Social Security, and it's established back during this time period as a system of social insurance for the elderly, for the disabled, and for the dependent or unemployed. And it was never, ever, ever, ever meant to take care of you in your old age. It was always supposed to be a supplement. And so at this point in your life, you still have plenty of time, I would imagine, to be able to set yourself up a retirement account. And that's what you need to do. Start paying yourself first. Because if you're going to depend on Social Security when you retire, you're going to have to figure out how to live on half of what you couldn't live on before. Because it's not meant to provide that kinds of funds. It's supposed to be just a supplement. People that are retired, people that are unemployed, when they talk about dependents, you're talking about children who have been orphaned by their one parent or the other. Children in that situation don't normally see these funds. They go to the caretaker for them, whether it is their surviving parent or a guardian on that one. And then, of course, those who are disabled. This is where your disability comes from. And then the Rural Electrification Administration, that's still around today, they're going to establish power plants out in the country areas so they can move into the 20th century and have electricity and those kinds of things. Now, there are going to be lots of accomplishments that are going to come out of a New Deal. You're going to have women and minorities who are going to gain high government positions. I mean, for the first time, you're going to have a female on the presidential cabinet. Unheard of before this time. Several African Americans are going to attain high positions. Mary McLeod Bethune is one of the most well-known of these. He's even going to have a black cabinet, which is a group of African American advisors that keep him up on issues that are unique to the African American community. For Native Americans, you're going to have John Collier step forward and create a work program for Native Americans. There's going to be the Fair Labor Standards Act, so we're finally going to have a minimum wage. Mexican Americans are going to get camps where they have better housing. Now, keep in mind, it's still not going to be the best housing in the world, but it was better than what they had before. And then finally, they're going to pass the National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act. So for the first time, you can have workers through their unions be able to collectively bargain for better benefits and better pay with their employers without risk of violence breaking out and that kind of thing that always happened in the past. Now, with all these wonderful things, they're still not going to substantially reduce unemployment during this time period. That's not going to happen until we get to World War II. With the advent of World War II, especially with the attack on Pearl Harbor, you're going to see unemployment drop to zero because all the men that can are going to go enlist, and all the other people are going to step in and fill in all those jobs. You're going to have other jobs created because of the war effort. And so World War II is what is really going to end the Great Depression. Now, I want to go back to the question I skipped a second ago. So you're talking about laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is a system where the government does not interfere in the workings of the economy. It's French for let it do. And so the economy would expand or contract based solely on supply and demand. And that can be a good thing, but it can also be an opportunity for a lot of mismanagement. And so what you want, if you're going to have government regulation, is you want to find a happy balance between regulating where they don't take advantage of the worker or the consumer, but not so much regulation that that business contracts and doesn't do anything. So that's what you want when you get government regulation. And so over the time frame, it's going to sometimes be imbalanced, and sometimes it's going to, tilt one way or the other. During this time period, though, there was a whole decade of the government not interfering or regulating business whatsoever. So the banks weren't regulated. The stock market wasn't regulated. The amount of production had no control over it. There was no minimum wage. And credit was going bonkers. I mean, people were taking out credit and assuming large amounts of debt without any kind of limit on it whatsoever. So those were the kinds of things that were not regulated in the 1920s that are going to impact what happens in the 1930s. Does that make sense? And so when you look at that question, to what extent were the laissez-faire policies of the U.S. government in the 1920s responsible for the Great Depression of the 1930s? Think about those things that were allowed to move of their own accord. So like the banks being allowed to give out loans for buying stocks, not for sure that those stocks were going to be secure. The stock market allowing buying on margin, over speculation, increasing the value of stocks beyond their true value. So there was nothing to watch over that. All the insider trading going on that was allowing this one guy over here to make a lot of money while all these guys over here weren't in on the deal. Or Ponzi schemes where you've got one guy who's getting people to invest in stuff and then absconding with the money. And so there was nothing to oversee any of that. Back in the 1930s. There was no regulation for these farmers who were thinking, well, I planted all this, but I only made about half of what I should have. And so next time I'm going to plant double so I can make what I need. And so they're overproducing. And then, credit companies, there was no limit. I don't know how many of you have credit cards, but I've got a credit limit on my credit card. And because in the past I have had issues and struggled financially and had to really work hard to get out of debt, today I make sure that I don't charge more on that credit card than I can pay off every single month. Credit companies don't like me very much because they don't make any money off of interest on me. But that way, if anything happens, that I am not up to my eyes in debt on that. And so that's what the question is talking about. What happened in the 1920s and why was it not regulated? That's going to impact what happens in the 1930s that makes it so difficult to get out of this depression, when in decades past we've always been able to manage to get out of these panics and get into a better situation. Now, not everybody liked FDR's plan. Now, FDR is a Democrat, and so you're going to expect that the Republicans are going to have something to say about it. And that's the way things work. If it's a Democrat president, you're going to have criticism by the Republicans. If it's a Republican president, you're going to have criticism by the Democrats. Okay? So it's to be expected that the conservatives are going to fear that it was the road to socialism, that he was monkeying around with the money supply, and they didn't like the way that they weren't sure that that was going to be a stable thing. And they were afraid of property and personal and business property rights being infringed upon. So Al Smith is one of the leading voices on the conservative side, but he's going to be joined by a group called the American Liberty League, and they are the watchdogs trying to make sure that FDR doesn't overstep his power, his position base, to make sure that everything stays the way it's supposed to stay. But he's also going to have his critics on the Democrat side. So the Republicans think he's gone too far. The Democrats don't think he's gone far enough. And some of your biggest voices on the Democrat side are going to be Father Coughlin and Francis Townsend and Huey P. Long. Father Coughlin wants to nationalize the banks and redistribute all the money. Now that, say you had fortunate enough had a nice little nest egg in a bank that hadn't closed yet. How would you feel if they said, okay, well, you've got enough. You keep this much, and we're going to take the rest of your money and spread it out for everybody else. And then you've got Francis Townsend, who, for everybody over the age of 60, give them $200 a month, but they have to spend all $200 every month if they want to get another $200 the next month. Now, this is going to be the base for what becomes Social Security later on. With Social Security, you don't have to spend all of it every month, although most people do because it's not all that much. And then Huey P. Long his program's called Share Our Wealth, and he wants to basically take from the rich and give to the poor. So if you are you got a lot of income, you're well established, like the Carnegies or the Rockefellers or the Roosevelts, then that he wants to take in, you get to keep $1 million, and everything else you make is going to go and be spread out amongst the destitute. If you inherited anything, then you get to keep $5 million, and the rest of it we're going to take from you. And that is not going to sit well. I think I said this in the last lecture. Taking from Peter to pay Paul is going to always be supported by Paul. But Peter is not going to like it very much because they worked hard for that money. And so those plans, while they're talked about, don't really gain a lot of traction. And so you get to the current day, 21st century, and there are still people that are critics of the New Deal of the 1930s because it is going to create a powerful bureaucracy. All these agencies, and a lot of them don't go away. I mean, think about all the different federal agencies that are out there. I mean, you got the FBI, the CIA, the INS, the IRS, and that's just the big ones. I mean, there are lots of little bitty small ones, and they have people that work in all of them. And so you have a lot of, the government has basically just ballooned in size, okay? And when the government grows that way, it requires more taxes to be able to support that large of a bureaucracy. They also say that it violated the free market system. And so they're saying too much control on the supply and demand and free enterprise. And then lastly, the deficit spending. And I haven't heard people complain about that recently, but over my lifetime, there have been times that one side or the other has criticized an administration over using government money to help out private industries. The last time I heard it was during the 2008-2009 economic downturn, and they were bailing out the corporations like the banks and the insurance company and the car industry to make sure that they could be stabilized. And there was a lot of complaint about that. But I can also see the other side, especially with the car industry. If you don't help them keep their businesses going, the major manufacturers, then think about all of the people across the country that would be out of a job. I mean, it's not just the car dealerships. It's the people that make the cars. It is the steel industry that provides the materials for the cars, and the rubber industry, and on so on and so forth. So sometimes Keynesian economics can be a good thing. You just got to really, really watch how much of it that is, how far it goes and how much is spent. Now, as time goes on, FDR is going to get irritated that so many of his programs are going to be ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And so he's going, I got this great plan. For every Supreme Court justice that is 70 or older, we're going to add a justice. Okay, so that at that time, that would have increased the Supreme Court from 9 justices to 15. And when a president nominates a justice for the Supreme Court, they always nominate one who is of the same viewpoints as far as politically as they are. So if it's a conservative president, they're going to nominate conservative justices. If it is a liberal president, they're going to nominate liberal justices. And so he's trying to get people on the court who are going to be more sympathetic to his New Deal programs and stop ruling everything unconstitutional. Okay? And it's, this idea has got to go through Congress. They can't just, he can't executive order that one in. And Congress is going to go, no. This is going to give the executive branch far too much power, overstepping what the Constitution had given it. So they're going to veto it, and he's not going to be able to overrule that. But the Supreme Court's going to get the message, and they're going to go, okay, we'll back off some and not be quite so critical of all the New Deal programs. And so that's known as the court packing scheme. And these cartoons here are all about the court packing scheme. So you have FDR, and you can tell it's him because of the cane, and you can see all of the different, Supreme Court and then dictator. So that's criticism of the court packing scheme. Same thing with this one here. They're using, they have the face of Roosevelt on the body of Samson from the Bible, and he is knocking down the pillars of the Supreme Court. And then this one right here, you've got FDR patting the heads of the Senate and the House because they are passing all of his legislation, and the Supreme Court over here that's been ruled in the teacher's pit. And so these are all cartoons in regard to the New Deal program. Let me go back real fast. I wanted to show you these pictures right here. So this sticker right here, that's the sticker that you'll see in the window of most of banks that are protected by the FDIC. Now, as we get into other aspects of the Great Depression, you've also got people that are going to try and make the public feel better. They're going to write stories about it. They're going to tell jokes about it. They're going to have movies about it. And so in the culture aspects, the two big pieces of literature that come out during this time period are John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. And it's all about the Joad family, J-O-A-D. And they get kicked off their land in Oklahoma. They're going to pack up all their belongings and they're going to go to California. This is the one that's got the clip I provided for you on Blackboard. And then the other one is Pearl Buck's The Good Earth, and it's going to win a Pulitzer Prize. And so these are all about the Great Depression era. On radio, you're going to have people like Jack Benny. Jack Benny was really funny, but he had that really dry humor. And he was always taking his hands and putting them up to his face and going, oh my. But you had to listen very carefully, but he was really, really funny. And then this is George Burns and Gracie Allen. They were a comedy team. And then I think Fred Allen was her husband. Now this guy right here, George Burns, he lived to be over 100 years old and smoked cigars like they were going out of style. There was a movie that came out at the end of the 20th century. So it's either late 1980s, early 1990s, and it was called Oh God. And he was an old guy by then, and he played God in that, and it was so, so funny. And then at the movies, you have The Wizard of Oz, and you have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, these two are technological wonders for the time period. Wizard of Oz is going to be the first time that they're going to go from black and white to color, right smack in the middle of the movie. And it's going to be Technicolor. This is when Technicolor first comes out. And you can see that written down here. I think that's what it says there. It's Technicolor. And then Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the first full-length animated feature. And so when and I'm sure all of you have seen it, because it's still around. Disney will reissue it out where you can see Snow White and the seven little dwarfs. Hi ho, it's off to work we go. And so this is some of the entertainment of the time period. So there are still lasting effects of the Great Depression. You have still got trade unions. You have got farm subsidies. Social Security is going to be the foundation of the modern welfare state. It was never, ever, ever meant to be what it has become. When the program was first established, they were not supposed to be able to use your Social Security number as an identifying number, nor were they ever to take the money set aside from that we all put in out of our paycheck. It was supposed to be in a locked away fund to only be used for Social Security benefits. Well, in the 1960s, that's going to change. And I think all of it changed under Johnson's, LBJ's administration. But he's going to have Congress take it out of its protected fund and put it in the general fund. And that's where we get the drain on the money that all of us have put in to Social Security. And that's where you get a lot of the pushback today on that. And the biggest thing I think that's going to be a lasting effect is it's going to totally change how people view the role of government and their responsibility to the people. This is when we start thinking about, what can the government do for me? And how can they help me out of this pickle I've gotten myself into? And so government is going to start assuming more responsibility for the welfare of the public. But that can also be a concern. Many centuries ago, I think it was de Tocqueville that said this, that a democracy was a great form of government and probably the best form of government until the people figure out that they can vote themselves things. And we've been steadily voting ourselves things ever since the Great Depression. And so that's something that needs to be monitored and looked into so that we don't spin ourselves right into oblivion. And so that is your Great Depression. Now, next class, we're going to dive into the first part of World War II and how the world gets into that total mess. So until next time, y'all have a great day. Thanks.